Hello and welcome to the Practical Leadership Podcast, where leaders share their tools and practical advice to make you a better leader today. My name is Max Kozlovsky. I'm going to be your host. And today I have a very special guest. I always say that, but she's very special in many different ways. She is what I call a finance executive turned entrepreneur turned business advocate. She's most recognized for two big things that make our lives better: Auntie Anne's and Cinnabon, and building those from pretty much scratch, building of franchises, adding new locations, helping transform and lead that. And that's kind of her previous life, and you'll tell us a little bit about that. And now she's become a huge advocate for small business, women-owned businesses as well. She's fighting hard at the city and state level to make all of our business lives a little bit better. She is brilliant, she's kind, she's caring, and she makes our lives better every day. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Fullerton here with us today.
Good afternoon, Max. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it'd been a little bit of a long time coming since we first talked and getting you here, but I'm so glad that you're able to make a little bit of time for us. So, Lisa, tell us a little bit about some good things that have been happening in your world in the last few, weeks or months that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I have to say, considering where we were 2 years ago, the fact that we're standing today and still have strong presence in San Antonio with both our empty ends, pretzels and Cinnabon, I would say is a great thing that's happening to us right now. So thankful to the city of San Antonio for loving both of our, we think, very well beloved national brands. We're proud of that. We brought Indians to San Antonio in 2000, and we like to say we've been making taste buds smile for 22 years now. We've actually been open and operating 22 Christmases. So considering the average lifespan is 8.5 in our industry, we're pretty proud of that long tenure. And we have the citizens of San Antonio to thank. Greatly appreciate their loyalty.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I don't believe something like that happens by accident, not even close. Tell us a little bit about how, just a little bit about your transition from corporate to entrepreneur to being able to build this great organization. And again, I think that there's, probably a couple of big franchises that we all know and love, and definitely the ones you run are one of them. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, back in the mid to late 90s, I was working as a behavioral science managing director. I love this firm, behavioral science in Austin, Texas. And I loved the job and I love the owners. In fact, the business was encouraging people and their leadership style. And it was based on a correlation between their concern for people and their concern for productivity and where people felt on that grid. This company was called Grid International. I loved it and thought I'd be a lifer there, but I joked with the owner that he did such a good job encouraging me, empowering me, that he made me feel I could maybe run a business for myself. And so I decided if I was working hard for somebody else, maybe I could be the recipient of my own hard work. So I began to look at, other options, what I can do to run my business. I get this question all the time. Why a novel idea? Where did that come from? I was actually working on generating a day timer for high school students. This was back in the 90s before that was a big thing. I'm a chronicle list maker. I love crossing off stuff as it's completed. So I was actually ready to go interview with the school system and introduce them to the idea of bringing this day timer to their students to help them organize themselves. Because every organizer thinks that everybody else needs to be organized. And literally 3 days before I was going to the district to inquire and see if I could get this into the school, they called me and told me one of our school groups, civic groups, is actually trying to do the very same thing. And the school has got to support its students rather than bring somebody from outside in. I had already created a business plan. I already had reserved the name. I mean, that was a legitimate business. And I lost that major client. So I think that stirred something in me that said, I really need to do something, and maybe I need to think even bigger. it was then that I began researching franchise concepts when I realized I'm personal friends with the founder and CEO of Auntie Anne's Pretzels. So Ann Byler was my neighbor in Round Rock, Texas in 1984 before she even started the business. She started the business in February of 1988. And I don't know if people know the concept and how Auntie Anne's got started, but if you don't mind, I'd love this part about what we do.
Please.
Um, so Anne and her husband went through a very trying time and lost a daughter in a farming incident, and grieved about that loss for many, many years. They lived in Pennsylvania, but moved to Texas with the church, planning a church, when they received Christian-based counseling that saved their lives, saved their marriages, just their spirits. So they moved back up to Pennsylvania so that Anne's husband, Jonas, could start a counseling center, but they wanted to do it on a needs-based sliding scale and what people could afford. So Anne said, well, I guess it means I'm going to have to go get a job and I'm going to have to support this family. They were living in their mother's basement. I think granted $250 a week, two teenage girls. When Anne got a job working at a farmer's market in Pennsylvania, Downingtown, Pennsylvania, selling pizza, strombolis, and pretzels. And she liked everything, the way that everything tasted except the pretzels. So her husband came in and said, let me add a few ingredients to the recipe, like what my mom used to do. And they actually got a shipment, and I think some wrong ingredients arrived and actually improved the recipe. And that's the recipe that are in of our pretzels today. And so they said that was God's divine intervention. They got rid of everything but the pretzels. And lo and behold, that is the product that we have in the stores today. But I think probably the most significant um, thing about the brand as a Christian myself is the significance of what a pretzel stands for. Are you familiar?
I please share with all of us.
Okay. So in 610 AD, Italian monks used to take strands of leftover Easter bread and roll it into a long line, and they would roll it in the shape of hands folded in prayer. And they would give these Latin pretiolas, meant little rewards. They would give these little rewards to kids who recited their prayers. And the three holes in the pretzel stand for the Trinity. So Anne and Jonas, being Christians, said, oh my gosh, if this is not another ordination, that this is what we need to be doing. I don't know what it is. So I've always loved that story. And that's really one of the reasons why the Auntie Anne's brand is so personal to me, is I was neighbors, next door neighbors with the founder before Auntie Anne's was even around. So we've been um, very dear friends for 30 plus years. And I know I'm dating myself, but that's a pretty significant story to me, and why Indians is so special to me.
Yeah. So I always knew you were very people caring from, hearing you speak, but I didn't know that there was so much purpose behind it and how it connected, your faith and the meaning and this higher power that you're, working through. So how did the experience both at your corporate job, having to get your hands, I was going to say your hands dirty, but that was quite the opposite, right? But getting your hands into the dough, and building this organization to where you are now. How do you think your leadership, your mindset, and your beliefs about leadership has transformed, strengthened, and what does it look like now?
I have always believed there's multiple ways to lead people, but the one that resonates to me, I've had modeled for me that has just become a part of what I've adopted and adapted as my own mantra, if you will, and that is lead by example. So, I left the corporate world where I had a beautiful glass office in the Arboretum in Northwest Austin. And I traded in my suit for a uniform and a ball cap, working long hours and on weekends in the mall. And that was a very humbling time. But I think what it did more than anything else was people didn't know who I was. Customers didn't know who I was. They treat just the same way they did my employees. And people aren't always considerate of those in the food service industry. So I got a bird's eye view to how my staff was treated because they saw me exactly the same way. I think that made me a better leader, having performed every single job and task that I would ask them to do. I did every dirty little job that's involved scrubbing floors, squeezing lemons, food orders. I've done it all. And so I think as a leader, for me to be able to manage people where I have done each and every function gives me credibility, I think, to the staff that I lead.
And how do you think that credibility or seeing people having people see you do the dirty jobs and the hard jobs and the showing up on Sundays and in Christmases and stuff like that to the mall, how do you think that makes them feel, act, do, and how do you encourage that? How do you promote more of that?
Well, I think all things are contagious, both good and bad. So I've found, I could be an atmosphere changer. I can change the dynamics in my room just by my own attitude. And so I would walk into a shift and I would try to be as positive and encouraging as possible. And it really was just an incremental change. You could feel the dynamics in the room change. And I tried to let people know there's dignity in every kind of work. Our founder, Amy Myler, she actually had a saying that said, you should look at every customer as if they are the president of the United States or Jesus Christ himself. So if you begin to look at every customer as worthy of the dignity, then I think you also feel in your heart that your job is also full of dignity. And I tried to show them that, and that what I was asking them to do was not beneath me. I would do everything that I was asking them to do. And I had always hoped that that was something that they would pass on to others and incorporate as part of their leadership style.
So here's I try to kind of play the little bit of the role of the naysayer sometimes.
Yeah.
So the naysayers would say, well, yes, Lisa, you could do that because you were the owner and you could, infect the team and the people there with positive energy. But I'm not the owner. I'm just a manager. I'm just, baking. What are your thoughts about that?
It's a great point. And I've often said to people, I think if owning a business was easy, more people would be doing it. But there were often times where I probably made less doing that job than the people I was elbow to elbow with. So, it was my job to ensure that the company continued to run. It was my job to make sure that all bills were paid. And I was paying bills and doing payroll and scheduling, all those things off hours. So it wasn't just that I was in the stores 40 hours a week. I was in the office 30 hours a week. So for the first 3 years of the company's inception, I worked 70-hour weeks. So I think when people realized, gosh, maybe owning a business isn't that glamorous because she's coming in with the schedule in her handwriting. Back in the days when we were handwriting, she's coming in with the paychecks with her signature. She's coming in with the food order she prepared at home. She's here checking into work. She's here putting up a food order. I think when people began to see that there was a significant responsibility that comes with ownership, so there is a privilege, but with privilege come, comes responsibility. So I think I was able to model that, yes, I might be the owner, but I'm willing to do anything that I ask you to do because I care about how this business turns out.
So that leads me to two more questions I'm super intrigued to learn about. But I want to keep going on this idea of infecting the team with a positive attitude, a positive mindset, and some energy. Do you think that team members can do that for each other, even if the owner is not there? Did you ever see that happen? Did you have some people that could, uplift spirits?
I think I have a good answer to that question, something tangible. We hired a business coach at a time that we were maybe at a plateau in our business and trying to decide, do we go over 50 employees? Because at that time, there was insurance and mandates that we were required if we moved over 50 employees. So we hired a business coach and said, what can talk us through that? And one thing he said that really resonated to us was, you and your husband know absolutely how you feel about the business. You've got it in here and here, but your staff doesn't know that. So what are you going to do to you should praise, infect the staff when you're not there? So we created a set of core values and actually took them to our leadership team and said, how do you feel about these? Do you feel this is not aspirational? This is who we say we are, and that's who we'd like to be. And they said, yeah, we feel that that is who you are. We feel like that is what the company is about. And we allowed them to give us feedback and to buy into that. So it wasn't just Jim and Lisa saying, this is who we are. We're you better believe it or don't work here. It was that this is who we are. This is the environment and culture we're trying to create. So then we started we had plaques in every store. Actually created a jingle and had a contest for whoever came up with the best jingle. So we had a jingle so people could remember what those core values were. We used them in the write-ups. We used them in promotions. We used them in the job titles. So it wasn't just a plaque on the wall that got dusty. It was like, we're trying to live this out. And then we had a saying that our business coach used to say, it's always reprimand in private and bust people for doing good in public. So any opportunity that we could find to bust people for doing good, and that's intentional. Like, people, when they hear something being said to them, the first response is typically, okay, what did I do wrong? They were so disarmed by considerate comments that we created a tablet that was give to your peer when you recognize that they're doing something good and tell them which of the core values you just saw them model. So we literally had tear-off sheets. The staff would say, you were great with that customer. You were fun. And that's one of our core values. And give those to people. We had people put them up in the stores just to say, look what my peers think about it. We had one girl that said, I put them up here, but I want to take them home and show I'm home. So I think we tried to make encouragement something that was accessible to everybody. You don't have to be the owner. You don't have to even be the manager. As a matter of fact, if you're a staff at the register, it's your first day, if you see somebody do something, I want you to encourage them because that's the type of culture that we wanted to create.
Excellent. So not only purpose driven, but really defining the real core values. One of my favorite things to talk about. I think there's for all of you out there that have core values somewhere in a wall, somewhere in a document, or some that are just aspirational and not live up to, listen to Lisa, right? They have to be real. They have to be alive. They have to be active, and you've got to be using it consistently. And I love your idea of creating a jingle and making it fun to know them and to learn them and to recognize them.
It came out as a rap done by two of our college students in San Marcos. I can still hear the rap today. I mean, it was catchy and they won something for it. And then of course they got hosting rights for it. One thing I did want to tell you is not only did we use that for people who are existing staff, but we actually went out and hired a company and it created a video. This was a 10-minute video, pretty expensive for somebody in our industry, but every single interview, we started out by saying, we've interviewed you, had your first interview. Second interview is where we get to interview us and see if you're in alignment with who we are. So it wasn't that he didn't have to guess who they were coming to work for. We had a video that had all 5 core values, that had a leadership person within the company speak about those values and what we did to live in accordance with those values and the behaviors that you should see. I wrote literally like almost a page long for every single behavior within those core values, 26 of them. And I handed that out for 26 weeks. And it's a very short written so that if this thing happens, this is how I would handle it. This is how I would encourage you to handle it. So I tried to do things that were able to reinforce our core values. But more than anything else, I took an opportunity at every turn to say to my staff, if I don't live up to those core values, you get to tell me I didn't live up to it. You can hold me accountable to the values that I espouse to. And I think that was another deciding thing that said, she's more than a leader. She's a peer, and I can respect her more as a peer who happens to be my leader.
Wow. We're getting a lot of great value. Just a quick reminder for our audience. You can go and visit practicalleadership.com or practicaleadership.com. You're going to be able to download a summary and you're going to be able to download some of the ideas or some of the tools that Lisa has been talking about. And maybe, just maybe, we might be able to get that wrap in your hands and you're going to see that culture wrap created Antia and San Marcos and their team. And we'll see what other goodies Lisa gives our audience. So Visit the website and download the summary and download the tools. So lots of values going both ways with them, right? What a great concept. Look, you're not just coming in saying, hey, this is how I expect you to behave. You're saying this is how you should expect me to behave, and we're going to let each other know if we're not living up to that. On a different subject, you talked a little bit about hiring, right, which is a big hot subject today, and I really love that approach because I do believe that hiring is a two-way street. If it's going to be a good fit, it's not just that the candidate is a good fit for your company, it's that you're a good fit for them as well. And I love that you're saying, hey, let's let them interview us as well. Let's make sure that they feel that they are in the right place and not just us think that they are the right person. So it kind of taking the concept to the next level and going in a little bit deeper, that probably helped ensure you really had the right people and that, they hung around for a little bit longer. I need to shift gears to something else you mentioned because um, I love to talk about some of these things that might be a little bit more controversial because this to me is one of them. So
Oh,
you talked about, you know 70-hour work weeks and 40 hours, you know, behind the counter per se, 30 hours in the office, and doing all these things and doing them all yourself. And for the last 20 years, we've all been talking about preaching uh, this idea of work on your business, not in your business, right? Work on your business, not in your business. And people are saying, hey, Max, we've talked a lot about that. Lisa's saying that you should get your hands, in the dough and do it all yourself. Um, Delegation. When did that happen? Why did it not happen? What was the process there? I think I know some of the answers, but I can't wait to hear.
well, that's a fair question. And that's a fair statement to say, where's the quality of life in 7-year-old work weeks? And I would say there wasn't much in his early years. And the way I did it is not the only way to do it. It just happened to be the way that was a natural fit for me. So as a leader who's preparing to delegate, I have to make sure that I've done the right job, giving them the skills to make them successful so that they know how to respond in situations when they're not there and they are the leader. And it also happens in our industry, the food industry, we have very low margin. So a lot of it is you can't begin to delegate this stuff because you don't have the margins to pay for levels of management. So frankly, I was it until the third store. And I know people who add stores in quick succession, but I feel that you don't really know a trend for each store until it open at least a year. That way you can see what the trends are. Do they mirror my store in one mall versus the other mall? And I think it also lets you know, have my expenses been um, budgeted according to sales? Are we hitting my sales targets? So there tends to be something, I don't want to say magical, but there tends to be more margin when you hit that third store. So when we hit our third store, we could begin to hire managers at each of the stores and consider a regional manager to go over the stores so that I could then begin to focus more in the office. That's my strength, accounting and finance. That's my background. That's my love. That's, I think, my greatest gift to the business. I was working in the stores, not because I was gifted or the best roller. I simply just needed to be there to get those shifts covered and have that become part of my job. But when we hit that third store is when I could really then start um, integrating some more sophisticated processes and procedures and become more proactive. So now that I wasn't needed in the stores and I had people trained who worked literally elbow to elbow with me, they were then running the stores. And as I was always available. So one of the complaints I've heard about people in our industry is we're open 7 days a week. In the airport, we're open 365. In the airport prior to COVID, we had our first person show up at 1:30 in the morning and the ovens turned off at 10:30 at night. So literally, the ovens were still warm when the baker comes in at 1:30 to start baking. So I could get a call at any time. So it was also imperative for me to get an operational expert who could manage that stuff. So if you've got an issue, if it's not an emergency, hold that until a reasonable time tomorrow and let's talk about how to manage that. And the person who wound up in that role in my company was a manager over one store at first, was a manager over two stores, district manager over three. And this was the youngest hire I ever hired. He was 15 years old. We didn't hire 15-year-olds at the time in 2000, but he had an 18-year-old brother that worked for us. And his parents said, anyway, we could write a note asking Lisa Fullerton could come to work for you, it would be okay. Like I was, and my thought was, heck yes, I get a night off. Yes, I would love to. But because I worked elbow to elbow with somebody that had no prior work experience, we were in alignment. He knew exactly how I treated things. He knew exactly how I treated people. He saw me in action. He saw me under stress. And I think you and I both would agree. We tend to find out more about people, their true self when they're under pressure. And I was very, very aware that people were watching me and what I said and did was absolutely critical at that moment. So he and I worked together 23 years. He wound up being the top operations guy in the company, and we've had 9 stores over our 23-year history. So it pays to invest in those people. But one of the things people tend to do is say, here's a manual of how to, and in franchises, they're really good about how to, the manuals and proper procedures and running techniques. But that doesn't solve the people part of it. That doesn't talk about the people skills. That doesn't talk about how what you do translates into how they would then react to a situation. So I just felt it was really necessary in my case to take it slow, make sure I understood my revenues, make sure my expenses were in alignment. Because remember, that's my gift. That's my skill. I'm visionary. That's my favorite thing to do is to plan for something, to see it, and then also see it manifest from idea to actual execution. And like I said, we built 9 stores, every single one of them from scratch. We never inherited a new store. So people that witnessed me working, who then we were in alignment, then I could be free to be proactive and start looking at things like expanding the company, adding additional benefits. I mean, we had a 401k profit sharing plan, which is very, very rare for somebody in the food industry. But we also had people who were with us 10 and 11 years, which is also in the food industry.
So I'm going to want to get into that here in just a second. So this is what I heard. I mean, first and foremost, you felt that if you were going to be delegating, you first needed to know how to do things correctly so you could teach others how to do them not only correctly, but using your philosophy, your mindset, your approach, your values. Because the alternate approach was to abdicate, kind of like, I have a love-hate relationship with franchises. Sometimes they're like, hey, here's the book, good luck. And you're saying, well, there's a whole lot more to that book. And you've got to learn how to do it yourself, learn how you want it done. Then you can teach others. So you were very diligent about that process. And you said, that's going to be your approach. The second part was the financial.
I think you said something, you said that very well. And I think that one reason, and I'm not sure if I said this, but it's important to notice, because I felt like these people were representatives of, they were the face of the brand. So as I was back in Williams, no longer the face of the brand, I was training people who were. So you just put it more eloquently in fewer words, but
well, and I think well, thank you for doubling down on that important point, right? Everyone that works for you is a representative of the company, and they carry with them the weight, and they carry with them the responsibility of the image and what you stand for. And you wanted to ensure that was traveling well, but you were also recognizing that you were looking at a longer game, right? It wasn't we'll start 1 or 2 and then in a few years sell it, cash out and move on. You're thinking, how am I going to be able to build an organization that can handle multiple locations? So you were very diligent about, getting that little tree to grow straight, knowing that it's more difficult to correct it later, and knowing that it was going to become a big oak tree, and that it had to have like very strong roots in a very strong direction. And the second one is the cash conversation, right? Recognizing that, margins are relatively low. and you couldn't just hire a bunch of people to do a bunch of jobs, and you had to plan that out and recognize when you needed people to be coming in. That's one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to productivity, because sometimes the idea is, well, if you're doing a job that pays $15 an hour and you're not doing a job that pays $100 an hour, you're actually costing yourself. But I think with a vision of how that moves, right? Knowing that it's not going to be like that forever, and that you're trying to accomplish things, you can plan that out and not feel like I'm actually wasting money because I know how it plays out. Which
That's a really important distinction that you make, because there was a lot of time in the beginning that people said, I can't believe you're doing so much. Why don't you just hire out and have somebody else do that for you? But, being a person who'd spent 16 years in the finance world prior to that, is I absolutely know how to read a profit and loss statement. And I absolutely understand change of cash position. And those are things that never go away. And I think because I knew I bear the responsibility for personally guaranteeing leases, because that's what happens in the leasing world especially when you're new, is I had to personally guarantee an 8 and 10 year leases, and I've had 9 leases. And so this can be a huge burden and not something to be tinkered with. I've had people that said, would you talk to a friend of mine? They want to get their kids into a business and find something for them to do. And besides that being kind of an insulting statement that this is a hobby, um, if you aren't super serious and are not committed to working hard and doing absolutely whatever it takes, you likely won't be that person who's, you know, grounded, has roots, and is able to grow. And I believe we were able to grow in this industry because you need volume, which is why we would continue to be at stores. But I also didn't go into debt irresponsibly. That's another reason why I was intentional and slow in the growth. We looked at the airport not 6 times in 9 years before we got in the airport. It just wasn't the right life cycle in our business. It wasn't the right timing. We didn't have the right staff. Our finances were in the right place. And it happened the way it did for a reason. And I'm certain it was according to God's plan for us. And I probably wasn't ready for it. And just as a leader, it's a whole different venue. But I think all this stuff is critical, that it looks to the staff that we've got a lot of money coming, because that's what they do, is they handle cash on the transactions. They do the paperwork at night and say, wow, that's a big number. What I tried to do was educate them, and I would do these little cost sheets, you know, challenging them. Do you have any idea what our cost of goods are? Do you have any good what our labor percentages? Do you have any idea what our franchise fees are? What we pay? Do you have any idea what our rent is as a percentage of sales? Do you have any idea what the average person as a percent of their sales has left over? And if it's left over, it's to pay taxes, or it's to pay for benefits the following year, or it's to help fund growth or raises. And so when I began to speak clearly and truthfully and share some details that a lot of franchisees would say, I would never tell my staff that. And I said, and you're robbing yourself of being able to not only instruct and teach responsible spending, but I also want them to understand that it's not as fruitful as it looks. There's a lot of expenses to running this business. And I was always amazed at how amazed they were at how much it costs to run a business. I mean, especially rents in some of these significant large markets and large retail centers.
Yeah, I'll because we keep running into this time and time again where people are afraid to open up their books. I like to use a lot of Jack Stack's methodology in the Great Game of Business. And people are like, well, they're gonna know all these numbers. I'm like, what you don't understand is that they are making up numbers in their minds, and they're
Yeah.
much bigger than what you think, because they look at top lines. They're not looking at the rest of the P&L. So in their minds, if you build $1 million, you keep $1 million, and it's important to educate. So I'm really happy to hear that that was like your approach in teaching people. And I think that what it does is, not only does it help them understand the business better and act more like owners, which is a big principle of ours to really teach people how to behave like owners. But I think it ends up having an impact in their personal finances as well and in their personal lives. Because they start to recognize that, wow, if this organization has this, I also have income, I also have expenses, I also need to budget, I also need to forecast, I also need to be diligent and recognize when to make these moves.
We are really proud that for the 401k plan that we implemented, I think back in 2014, um, we had about a 90, for those that were eligible and meet the requirements, and those weren't our requirements, those were federal requirements, planning requirements. We were proud that like 98% of people participated. And they didn't have to put a dime in to get the monies that we were giving to them. We had the 401k that we participated in, a guarantee, and then we had a profit sharing based on the kind of year we had. And we paid out into that every single year except when we were COVID. And I would have people say, I can only put away $10 a paycheck. And I said, that's great. That's great because you're just becoming disciplined and you are feeling what saving means and what it feels like. And I promise you, once it's out of your check, it will be as if you didn't even know that you had it.
So much psychology going into that, right? And you were helping them build and establish the right habits. So like you do for the organization, you were doing for your team member. Let me ask you this question, because I think that, I'm very curious. The audience is going to be very curious. What gave you so much confidence? Where do you get your confidence from to be able to, as you said, personally uh, uh, um, guarantee 9, 10 year leases that if anything goes wrong, it's on Lisa Fullerton's name?
I can tell you, my confidence came from the fact that I didn't have an alternative. I didn't have an option. And so people have said, "Wow, you're so dedicated. You've been in this hard profession for all these years." And I laugh and I say, I know I have a lease I have to fulfill. And so, as courageous as it would sound, and maybe I'm dismissing some of it, is when you don't have a choice, you just do what you know you have to do. And I can remember in the early years when I was working those 70-hour weeks, thinking, I can't drag myself out of bed and do this again. And I gave myself 5 minutes to just play with the idea in my head. You don't have to do a darn thing. And then I would get up after that 5 minutes and I'd say, yes, I do. But I'm just a tenacious, committed person. And I've never been afraid of a challenge. I've never been afraid of hard work. Um, as a young kid, I was the daughter who was mowing the grass and I loved getting my hands dirty. To me, just a job well done. It is satisfying, and I feel satisfied by a job well done.
Yeah. Eh, eh, talking about how psychological these things are, right? So you said that you had no options, and I guarantee you had plenty of options, right? You had plenty of options, but in your mind, you had no option. And that's just who you were, and that's just what you had to do. So then you did it. And I think it's a lot to do with your identity and how you see yourself. As you just explained, right? You saw yourself as a hard worker, you saw yourself as determined. You didn't see failure as an option, and you were ultimately understanding success. So I'm super curious, and I'm gonna coin I'm gonna phrase it, coin the phrase. What, how do you say it?
Here's the coin phrase.
Well, I just want to say the Lisa's 5 minute rule. So tell us about Lisa's 5 minute rule.
Are you talking about like leadership rule or?
No, 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 no. So you kind of joked that some days you would wake up and
Oh,
you give yourself like 5 minutes to say, I don't have to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then 5 minutes later you were up. I'd love to hear that psychology and that mindset and the
well,
conversations in your mind.
I think for 5 minutes, I promised myself I could be transported to some place that I could play with the idea that I could be irresponsible. I could say no to everything. That it didn't matter what I did. I could be stubborn. I could dig my heels in. I could have a tantrum or pout. I could express my true feelings, like I don't want to go into work another day in a row. I think I'm at a 3 week streak, or there wasn't a break in a day. That's tough physically when you've got young kids, 9 and 12 when I started the business, and allowing myself that 5 minutes to just play with the idea that I'm not going to do this just made me see how silly and maybe childish it was. But at least I got a little time and I created a little bit of space and margin where I could do that. And then it was like, well, that was fun, but you got to get to it. So it was just enough to make me feel like I was running with scissors.
Well, this is such an amazing insight into how your brain works and operates. And I'll share with the audience this, because when you're giving yourself that time and that opportunity to explore this alternate world, you're actually releasing a lot of those negative emotions, right? You're letting yourself feel them, but you're also letting yourself feel what it would be like to have that alternative. And your brain doesn't recognize fact from fiction. It only recognizes what you're seeing. So basically, in those 5 minutes, you gave yourself all of those emotions, all of those chemicals that make you feel free, that make you feel independent, make you feel like you're in control, making you feel like you're in control of your life, even if you're just role playing, even if you're just kind of making it make believe, right? But your brain doesn't know that. So it's a great way to both discharge a lot of weight and negative energy, and at the same recharge, because in your brain, you were that person. You were
Oh,
that carefree, independent, not having to do
yes.
anything.
If it's even in my mind, right? And And remember, I had to go to the store and I had to be positive because I was wanting to be an atmosphere changer. I was wanting to be the person who created an environment I would want to work to. So I could not carry that negative emotion. So I've been an avid exerciser just about all of my life, and running has been a stress reliever for me. And so, there's things that I have done when times get tough. And over the last 23 years, there has certainly been difficult, tough times, tough moments, a lot of challenges. But I have to tell you, my greatest motivator personally is if someone doubts me, they have just given me the strength I didn't think I had. So I've often said the best motivator for me is the naysayer, because I don't like to take on things that I don't think I can handle. And it's very difficult for me to experience defeat, maybe admit defeat, but because I feel like there's always a way to make it work. And I think that tenacity is probably, maybe even a little stubborn, has probably served me well.
That is so cool to hear. I hear, a bunch of people that are very successful entrepreneurs, athletes, etc., refer to that, right? Like the best thing to do for me is and get me motivated is to doubt me.
Yeah.
Why? I've never really understood that or where it comes from. So how does doubt or somebody's doubt, fuel a fire for you, and gets you to double down and
You know,
go after it harder?
that's such a great question. And I think the reason that's motivating, somebody's already made a personal decision about what I can and can't do, but they don't know what I'm made of. They don't know what I can, what I'm capable of internally, externally. They don't know what motivates me. So to play like they're in my head, or to suppose they've already got it all figured out before I've even stepped into that role, that task, um, it's frankly, maybe it's insulting. And again, like I said, when if it's sink or swim for me, I'll float on my back for a while. If I'm tired, I'll float. But I haven't given up, right? So I'm still looking for a raft. I'm still looking for the shore, but I'm on my back taking a break. So it doesn't mean that I don't build in times for space and grace. I gotta have that, or I would have exploded years ago. But that's why my faith is so strong. Is I need something outside of myself. because I've often said when everything we do revolves around ourselves and we put ourselves at the center of all things, decisions, thinking we're in control of all things. So when we see ourselves in the center, we become self-centered. And I don't think we operate well when we're self-centered. That's different than thinking I have the confidence to do something. I've got confidence in myself because of the way God has designed me, and that I need to honor him with all that he's entrusted to me. And that became very clear to me during 2020, when COVID hit. Honestly, when COVID hit, I think I may have said this when we heard me speak. My first thought was, hey, that's cool. We could shut down for a week or 10 days and get all of our repairs and maintenance done. We don't have to go in after hours. We can get it all done. So when 8 to 10 days turned into 8 to 2 weeks, I was panicking and I was
Mm.
trying to understand what furlough meant because that was something reserved for the government and why you furlough versus terminate and keep benefits in place. And what's this PPP? What is this PPE? I mean, it was just, I've never worked so hard in my whole life because I was also not just worried about my business capital and how I was going to withstand it, but I was worried about my human capital, my staff. I was calling them, sending in cards and letters. I was doing videos to stay in connection with them because they were scared and they needed me to tell them it was going to be okay. So I had to tell them it was okay and I felt it was going to be okay. So during my morning hours, I would get up every morning at 5 or 6. I would do my devotional. I would do my reading. I was in Colson Fellows program, which is it's a study of Christian worldview. And I was also doing my C12 curriculum, which is for Christian CEOs. And during one of those days when I was really angry about, Lord, how I could lose all this. I've got 20 years of this. We're in the year of our 20th anniversary. I can lose it all. And it finally struck me, the Lord's kindness and gentleness, where he patiently waited for me to understand what he was trying to say. And that was, that's not what you were designed for. It's not even how I see. That might be how the world sees you. That might be what you think you mean to the San Antonio society or business community. But I designed you for something better. And oh, by the way, that's my gift to you. So here I was so worried about controlling and manipulating and, I gotta say everything I've worked for, my business, my staff. I mean, so wow, what an ego I had built into this and trying to control the whole thing. So, what I learned the hardest two of the last 23 years was even strong leaders need to be submissive to authority, but just make sure it's the right authority. To me, it's, the Lord and creator and just recognize, he's designed us for this. He doesn't give me anything we can't handle. I gotta tell you, I'd never do the last 2 years over again because it was hard. But sitting on this side looking back, um, I think he was using me and my business to show people how to respond dignified, even when I'm stressed, even when I don't have all the answers. Because it's okay for a CEO to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to go find them. Bear with me. I'm going to take care of you. I think people just needed to see that there was some humility. Um,
So really taking the opportunity of adversity and saying there's more, right? There's more because maybe without COVID, everything's just a straight line, and with it really changed your trajectory, and even what matters to you. And if you think you had big problems, then you're getting yourself into bigger problems now that are, I say problems, but the type of impact and the size of the impact that you can have in some of your new projects and ventures and ideas and government work and stuff like that can end up dwarfing the organization that you had in terms of the impact, which is what you recognize that there might have been something more, or there is something more that you need to contribute to.
well, and I think it's easy for us to get complacent when we've mastered what we do. And I also think that COVID taught me that I was complacent. We were debt free. for the first time in 19 years.
Wow.
That really helped us. Again, another blessing, because it's when you're growing your business, and we're a very heavy leasehold improvement, heavy capital expenditure upfront business. Uh, it's very hard to be debt free. It's very rare. And so there were so many things I think that I thought, how we mastered this, we got past this, that I think it was a recognition to me. I had become comfortable and complacent. And so I'm sure there was more learnings in that, but I'm just sharing some of the things that I learned, to your point, through adversity. And I think sometimes I said this early on, people see who we really are when we're under pressure. And I just hope I was able to demonstrate to my staff that um, I'm under a lot of pressure, but so are you, because you don't know when you're coming back to work. Um,
I mean, it sounds like you have handled pressure with a lot of grace. And I'm pretty sure that you did not lead on to the amount of pressure that you were feeling all these years building the organization, because you always look calm and collected. And I'm sure it's not necessarily the case inside, but outside you definitely portray that. So let's see if we can tackle one more practical thing. You've already kind of told us a little bit about this, but hiring is an issue. Retaining people is not what it used to be. And it looks like I don't want to use the word mastered it because of what you just mentioned, but you've got a pretty good, you know, handle on how to make sure people are happy and want to stay with your organization. So what would you say to leaders that are out there that might be struggling to keep the right people, and are trying to figure out ways that they can really create an organization where people want to stay forever?
I think when you treat them like a person and not as a cog in the wheel, I think that's probably what's benefited us the most. I can think of a couple of issues that come off the top of our head. We've had people who needed to take medical leave, so we held their jobs open. We had one manager out so long with an eye issue, we had to put somebody in his place. So when he came back to work, he had to go to a different store at a different level, whereas at the level that he left in. And, still gave him the same pay, but we said, when that job's open and when we've got another position, we're going to move you into that. We've had people lose parents, we've had people lose children. We had a charitable fund that if somebody had a bill they couldn't pay, put money away every month into an account. And that if people had a bill that they needed to help with, we paid it. I mean, we found out an employee, I only found out because a crew member, a manager came and told one of her crew members was living in her car. She said, I know you would hate that, and I didn't want you to find out any other way. It was right before Christmas party, so I pulled this person into the other room and I said, how do we get you out of your car and into an apartment? You don't pay deposits because they could get that back. How do we get you into an apartment? So we helped her pay some bills so that she could get into a lease. I mean, those are the kinds of things you do when you appreciate people as people. Yes, I appreciate what they do, and I need them desperately in the roles that they fill in our stores. But there's value in that person, in the life they live.
Yeah.
Can I tell
And
you one other activity I was trying to do to also help our staff see each other that way is we did an activity where every staff member put something they were struggling with into it. They wrote it, it was anonymous, they stuck it in a jar. And then when everybody was finished, each person took out and read what somebody's dealing with. Of course, we didn't know who was dealing with it. But by the time you pulled 60, 70 of those out of there, you hear just what's going on in that group. You realize there's a lot of people struggling out there. So I think just acknowledgement and compassion and be helping them find their way through.
that's amazing. This is the type of stuff that this podcast is made for. Um, and I didn't know you were going to give me another gem. So, treat people like people. It's broad, but how do you do that? And I think that there's a lot of elements that you have to get right to be able to get to the point where you can do what you did. But I want to point out, and just want to mention a few things, right? So you have to have a purpose. You have to have strong values. You've got to hire the right people. You've got to use your values for that. Because if you hire the right people, then you can open up your heart and your wallet to do some of the things that you're doing for them, to be able to support them, because you know that they are the right people for you. They're not there to take advantage or see how they can, get away with something. They're genuine. So you've got to have those pillars in place. But once you have that, then you can. I love the idea. I really love the idea of a saving for your team members, right? Like creating a separate account, putting some money aside that is dedicating to helping people when they have a challenge. I've heard about that in restaurants where everyone would put a little bit of money for that time where somebody leaves without paying, and it's coming off of the waiter's check, and then there's that fund that everybody had put together to help
Uh-huh.
them. And I love your idea of saying, hey, as a company, we can do the same. Because here's the deal: if you're going to be growing, you're going to have a bunch of people, and everybody comes with some baggage and some things that they're dealing with. You're going to have to be able to step up. So plan for it.
And how blindsided of me to tell my staff, you need to take care of the customer and you need to give them your attention. You need to be thoughtful. You don't know what they're going through. Well, if I just muscle through and didn't give them the same courtesy and consideration, I mean, what a hypocrite I would be to say you need to treat customers better than I treat you. So I always felt, because there's people who have a natural gift to deal with people and those don't. And you just work a little harder with those people. I mean, I've had people that weren't huggers and I'm a hugger. Literally every new hire I ever meet, I would go in, meet them, find out what store they were going to, and I would tell them, this is both a warning and an introduction. I'm a hugger. Do you mind if I come and hug you? I've had people cry that said, oh my God, I would love to have a hug. Oh my God. Like I went into a store where a manager was talking to an employee. They looked like they were having a serious conversation. So I said, am I coming into something? But do I need to leave? And they said, no, you're okay. So I could just sense that the employee was really struggling with something. So I said to her, um, do you need a hug? I mean, just simple, just simple. She didn't need it. I said, do you need a hug? And she said, I do. And I hugged her and she cried and she cried. She just found out her husband was leaving her. I mean, this is big, big, heavy stuff. So if I just said, what are you guys doing in here? We need to get to the front store. I mean, even if I thought that for a brief second, I have that ability as a leader and I should. I take all my emotions, all my thoughts, all my visions, what I see collectively around it, and I put it in a filter. Because I can't say everything I'm thinking, right? Because you can't take that back. But because I can read the room and I can read her face look, she looked horribly sad. He looked devastated, like I don't know what to tell her. But he said to me, he called me later and he said, you made her day. How simple was that? It cost him nothing but a little time and attention and value in her emotion and her experience at that moment. So
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that consistency. Right, I love that consistency. You treat your team like you expect them to treat your clients, and you can't have one without the other, and there needs to be consistency.
correct.
You gave us another gem with this. I don't know if you have a name for it, but I just called it the struggling jar, where where everybody has an opportunity to kind of be heard, right, and hear others. And I guess it builds a lot of empathy and compassion, because you recognize that you're not alone. You're not the only one that's struggling with something. And sometimes we feel that our team members need to be robots, and we fail to recognize that they are human beings. And yes, we've got to be able to have the difficulties of our life and do the work and perform. But that doesn't mean that somebody else can't say, I'm with you, I hear you, I feel your pain, now let's get to work. But there's that ability to connect. So I'm hearing that you're building a group of people that know, like, trust each other, and you're building a community with them, and there's so much support built in, and as you said it, right, like cost-free support, that they don't want to go anywhere else because they feel at home. right?
I have an employee who worked for me for 7 or 8 years that left in, greener pastures, and we're always grateful for the time that they can spend with us. She's been gone 3 or 4 years, I think I said, and she still calls me her work mom. She said, I'll never, I go to new jobs and they say, I can't believe how much you know about how to run your department, your store, or whatever. And she said, you taught me all of that because you thought it was important that I knew that. But she said, because you took the time. She said, at the time, the accountability felt kind of tougher, and grateful that you invested in me, so that other people know, wow, where'd you get that? How do you have knowledge of that? And so we spend a lot of time with our coworkers. We really should look at them as um, depositories for ways to influence their work experience so that they can do the same to others. And yes, I think by showing I'm a hugger, I'm a words of affirmation person. Um, I'm trying to give my staff permission to be the same.
I love it. I love it. So quick reminder for our audience, practicalleadership.com or practicaleadership.com. Download the summary and download the how-tos and some of these tips and advice that Lisa's sharing with us. And again, I will not forget about getting you that wrap and maybe
In the archives.
of those points of culture to kind of help you, see what it's like to be there and do that. So I know you've shared a lot of great stuff. Um, we're running a little bit out of time. So Lisa, what is something that you want to share with leaders out there that I haven't asked you about, but you feel like, they need to hear you and they need to be able to go back to their teams and start doing?
I've always thought that I was a pretty um, I'm not a conformist. That's not the right word. I respect authority and I treat authority respectfully, but I also am a strong believer in truth. And I have become a business advocate in the last 5 to 6 years, not because of desire, but because I was in a situation at the airport where it's a very political arena, and there were some labor peace agreements, and like labor unions trying to come in between my employees and myself. And I began to speak out against it. And people said, wow, that's dangerous. That's a slippery slope. I can't believe you're going to go on record and try and fight against something that involves your employees. It's going to look like you are anti-employee. And I said, I'm just staying with the paid sick leave because I was actually sat on a commission, was Mayor Nuremberg's appointee on that paid sick leave commission. And people said, I can't believe you're going on record and talking about not paying paid sick leave to people. And I said, it's not that I'm not willing to pay these benefits. I don't want the government to mandate to me what I do. And I think that's the most thoughtful thing I can do for my staff is to fight for my ability to run my business unique that makes another idea unique so that I'm distinctly different from my competitors. Because if the government homogenizes us and tells us we all have to do the same thing, how do I stick out as different? How do I stick out as unique? And if I can't go to bat and say, if you make me pay paid sick leave to my employee, I'm going to have to terminate their 401k plan. I think investing in their future is equally important, maybe more important, because I'm trying to show them the value of post-felony, gratification, setting aside for a future. That's what's happening in my life now. I made a lot of really good frugal decisions along the way, and it's bearing fruit today. You can't see that when you're 20. So, I don't ever think by challenging authority respectfully that it's a bad thing. I think we all have to challenge authority when we feel and can prove true otherwise, because I think the staff feels good about, and they had the conversation with, this is why I'm doing that. Not because I don't want you to have paid sick leave. I want you to have all the things you have today. So if you're taking 3 or 4 days off without pay, think about the benefit of your 401k growing. Think about your dental and your vision and your life insurance and your short-term disability. I had to have the conversation with them so they didn't think I was being two-faced or a stable thing or doing whatever. So I think as long as you can challenge, but speak in truth, thoughtfully, I would say that that was probably the biggest shifting moment for me, was to think I had to be submissive to all authority, submissive and respectfully challenging or achieving things. I would say that might be my part of.
Thank you for that. I think you make a great point, right? So you can be pro people and against some of these mandates because part of being an entrepreneur is that you figure out better ways of doing things, different ways of doing things. And you touched on one of my favorite subjects, which is differentiation. We'll talk about that some other time. But the idea that you are looking for differentiation even in the way that you run your HR, right? How you work with people, how you treat with people. And by getting mandated on how to do it, it might not necessarily match your philosophy or approach, which could actually be better than what's out there, right? And challenging what they're trying to say must be done to saying, hey, there's a better way. I can find a better way. I'm going to do better for my team. So we're almost done. If you can stick around a couple more minutes, I just want to summarize a few things that I think are really important that you said, right? So the first one is lead by example. Know the front lines, do the work yourself. That will lead to a lot of credibility. Be a person that can change other people's attitude, energy, hope, and recognize that there is dignity in all work, and make sure that your team feels and knows it. And what better way than doing it yourself? So that to me was critical. So that mindset aligns really nicely with this idea that if you're going to delegate, what better than to have done it yourself first? How do you want it done? What does it look like? What's the mindset, philosophy, or approach? So then you can teach others, because you're not just doing it yourself so you can teach one other person. You're doing it so you're building an organization that can, be like you and act like you. Second big conversation was on core values, and not only the importance of having them, but having them be real, not aspirational, making them fun, right? Making a rap out of them. Because it's a fun way of making sure that people can really hear them, understand them, and then all these activities that make them come to life. I love the idea of, writing value tickets, right? Like it sounded like when you see somebody behaving in the correct values, you kind of give them a ticket for that, and everybody gets to see it. You recognize in public and then reprimand in private, which was a big thing. But finding all the different ways that you can do that. There's so much more, but I think I have something here that I really want to talk about a little bit more. I think the confidence comes from knowing that there's a purpose, and that you're here to accomplish something great, and it's almost like your duty as a human, to be able and keep pushing yourself, not getting complacent, getting better, and doing better for others. So if you don't forget about that, then you can push. And then Lisa's 5-minute morning rule, right? Give yourself 5 minutes to imagine yourself not having to do any of the stuff that you don't want to do, and what it would be like, because it'll help you release both the energy and all the good positive chemicals in your brain to make you feel like if you had already done that. And then from there, you're like, okay, I'm good now. And then, get up and keep going. And I think part of your mindset, I really love what you said in this, and I'm just using my words here, but in your world, you said, I've burnt all the bridges, right? I've burnt down the boats. There's no option but going forward. Even though I guarantee there were lots of options, you didn't want to see them. You didn't want to know them. You said the only way is to push forward. And then you did. And ultimately, taking great care of your people and treating them like humans, and recognizing that they're humans, and doing things that make sure that you get to hear them, you get to see them, they get to hear and see each other, which allows to build a greater community of people that know and care for each other and support each other, which then makes them want to stay and do their best. So I know I've missed a few things, but there are definitely some of the highlights for me. Lisa, before I let you go today, what is something good, fun, happy, exciting that's coming up here in the next few weeks or months for you?
Well, I just had a very big birthday. It was a I'm turning into a new decade. And for those who don't know this, in August of 2021, I sold my own stores. I still own and operate the airport co-brand. And the folks that bought the mall store are my partners under management agreement at the airport. So kind of trying to slow things down a little bit. Enjoy, it's been a madcap 23 years. I've got granddaughters I'd like to spend more time with, a husband I want to spend more time with. But I think we have a few things maybe in the works that could be exciting that you might want to look for in the future. So uh, I want to slow down. And my husband said, if this is slow down, you really don't understand what retirement's going to look like. But I feel blessed to be in the situation I am. That I've been attached to two great brands for our period over 2 decades. But yeah, I'm not done yet. But I, with a little bit of the time that's been given to me, I'd like to do some kingdom building things to honor the Lord and all He's done in my life. And so I'm kind of staying open and prayerful and thoughtful about what that might be, what that might look like. Because I spent a lot of years where commerce was the main driver, and I'd love to be able to do some work and give back time, talents, or both. So
Well, I can't wait until we talk again and you let us in a little bit into those projects you're working on and to see how, some of the hard work you're doing at a city and state level and how that has helped evolve and helped all of us business owners as well. Lisa, it's been fantastic having you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And again, we hope to see you again soon.
it's been my honor, Max. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all very much. Practicalleadership.com. Download the summary, download the tools, maybe even the wrap, and we'll see you guys soon.